반갑습니다. 서울대학교 국제대학원 이수영 교수입니다. 오늘 에피소드는 OECD에서 근무하고 있는 경제학자인 Ricardo Espinoza 박사의 설명을 듣도록 하겠습니다. 리카르도는 제가 University of Maryland 경제학과 조교수일 때 제 수업을 듣고 같이 연구를 진행한 학생이자 동료 연구자이고요. 제 지도 학생은 아니지만 제가 thesis committee에서 같이 어드바이징을 담당한 이력이 있습니다. OECD에서는 리카르도 박사가 네이버와 에듀케이션, 즉 교육과 노동 팔러시가 연관되는 부분, 학생들 교육뿐만 아니고 이미 근무하고 계시는 성인들에 대한 재교육까지 이 겹치는 부분에 대해서 많은 연구를 진행하고 있는데 이에 대해서 일단 소개를 드릴 예정입니다. 저희 에피소드에서 계속 말씀드리다시피 현재 교육, 특히 대학이나 대학원 교육, 재교육에 있어서 일자리와 직결되지 않는다면 그 유용성에 대해서 과연 올바른 것인지 개인이나 가정의 입장에서는 많은 질문을 할 수밖에 없습니다. 이 부분에 대해서 학계에서도 논란이 많이 있을 뿐만 아니고 또 정부 정책 당국자조차도 여러 가지 상충되는 문제들을 많이 겪고 있습니다. 이 부분에 대해서 조금 더 모범적인 국가 사례를 포르투갈을 예를 들어서 소개를 할 텐데요. 한번 관심 있게 들어보시도록 하시죠.
Hi everyone, my name is Ricardo Espinoza and I'm very happy to be here with you today and to share my work experience in an international organization. Before getting started, let me just briefly introduce myself, tell me where I'm from, etc. to give you a little bit of background. So I'm originally from Chile. I was born and raised in Santiago. I studied my undergrad degree in engineering and then did my master's degree in engineering in Chile as well. I worked for a couple of years in Chile in a university as a research assistant before applying to the Ph.D. in economics in the US. So I moved to the US back in 2011. I did do my Ph.D. at the University of Maryland near Washington, D.C. So, and there was exactly where I met Sue. I met her when I was in my third year. I remember she invited me to participate in a research project, and then we established a very good working relationship until now, actually. So, after she invited me to participate in this research paper, she also gave me some very good advice, and she became like a second advisor. She was a great mentor. She was always available to give advice, to teach me useful stuff. So I'm very grateful to her, and I'm happy that you also have the chance to have her as a teacher. So when I graduated in 2017, I decided to apply to several jobs, but I really wanted to work on a international organization or a job which is a strong component of policy. So I applied to several jobs, of course, and I accepted an offer from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an international organization based in Paris. For those who don't know what the OECD is, it's a member organization which now has 37 countries, which represent about 80% of world trade and investment. So it's mostly highly developed countries. Korea is one of them, of course. So at the OECD, what we do is we basically governments gather together and they work together to find solutions to common policy challenges, and they develop standards, they share experiences, and they also try to identify best practices so that they can implement better practices in their countries. So it's some sort of think about as a sort of forum, as a hub, a knowledge hub, where we collect data from all over the world of the member countries. We exchange experiences, best practices, and we also administer certain tests. For example, if you're aware of the PISA test, well, the PISA test is managed by the OECD, as well as the PIAC test, which is to measure adults' skills. So the OECD was created back in the 50s, basically to manage the American and Canadian aid to reconstruct Europe in the context of the Marshall Plan. Now, what we do today is a bit different, of course, because there's no reconstruction needed. But basically, we work on setting international standards. We try to find solutions to a broad range of social and economic and even environmental challenges. So we foster cooperation between countries. We foster the exchange of good practices in a broad range of areas, such as, for example, international tax evasion, education, labor, tax policy, etc. The organization is based in Paris and has nowadays about 3,000 staff, all based in Paris. There's only one headquarter in Paris. Now, within the organization, I work in the OECD Center for Skills, which is a horizontal center that works very closely with the education director on the one hand, but also the labor or director. So what is the role of the OECD Center for Skills? It's basically, it tries to bring together the worlds of education and labor, right? Which are usually completely separated in most of the countries. We have education policy on one hand, labor policies on the other. Think of like lifelong learning policies, which are sort of in the middle, are completely separated. Responsibilities are scattered across the government. So the OECD Center for Skills, what we try to do is to try to bring together these two worlds in order to develop policies that are coherent, that are mutually reinforcing, and we basically try to help countries in designing and reforms in the area of skills. So we try to bring together all these parties to the table. We try to talk to them, see what are their key challenges, how they think the system could be improved. And so we work very closely with countries. We develop projects that are about 1 year to 2 years long, in which we really try to understand what are the key issues, the key governance challenges that countries face, and we try to give them very concrete advice, like policy recommendations on how to overcome these challenges. So this is basically the work of the OECD Center for Skills, and I'm basically an analyst and project lead in the Center for Skills. So the focus of my work and research lies at the intersection of labor and education. And actually the main goal of my job is to give countries concrete advice and policy recommendations to improve labor and education policies, but also the connection between these two. Now, why is it important to link these two policies? I think that the main reason is that this old paradigm of sort of front-load study period, where basically you go to school and then to university and then you work for the rest of your life, is definitely obsolete. So workers nowadays need to upskill and reskill throughout their lives in order to catch up, for example, with technology, with new demands in labor markets, both inside but also external labor markets. And therefore this lifelong learning process requires that education and labor policies are closely aligned. Otherwise, we risk that many investments in education are then useless for students when they start looking for jobs. Therefore, if we want a smooth school-to-work transition, and we also want to give the possibility to workers to continually engage in learning, it is key that these policies are closely designed. So this idea of complementarity and alignment, it is very difficult to achieve in practice. Why? Because these two policies are usually highly segmented and different ministries work in isolation. So what happens in practice is that there's a huge disconnection between labor and education policies. Now, disconnection in what sense? So first of all, they have different budgets. They respond to different stakeholders, but also more importantly probably is they also have different visions of what education and skills are meant for. Therefore, there's no unified vision or strategy to respond to changes. For example, think of technological change or new developments in artificial intelligence. Therefore, it is not easy to find only huge policy gaps, but also duplication of efforts. This is especially relevant, for example, in areas such as adult education and training. So the work of the OECD, where I work, is to help countries bridging these gaps by working closely with different ministries, different agencies in the government, but also with stakeholders to find not only consensual solutions, but also solutions that are based on evidence. So the main type of projects that we work and OECD Center for Skills are the so-called skill strategy projects. So these projects are basically sort of an in-depth assessment of the key challenges and opportunities that a country face in the areas of education and labor, and then we devise policy recommendations in these areas. So through the course of these projects that usually last about 18 months, we involve a large number of stakeholders, typically more than 150 people from different ministries, also involve business representatives, unions, teachers, etc. We organize large workshops, we hold bilateral meetings, focus groups to jointly identify the key priority areas, and we try to find consensual solutions to the most important and pressing problems in the areas of education and labor. So in this context, I would say that and most governments agree, by the way, that the process through which we reach to the conclusions is as important as the final output, which is typically a report. So countries value, of course, the report, but as important as the report is the process, meaning this projects gives the opportunity to countries to discuss these issues with stakeholders that usually have no voice or have little contact with. And therefore, throughout these 18 months, the OECD acts as some sort of a neutral player, which facilitates the discussion around these topics. And of course, the idea of involving a large number of stakeholders is key for ensuring that these recommendations are finally implemented. So we've worked with about 20 countries over the past 5 years, and my role in these projects basically is to lead the team of analysts and researchers in the projects, typically ranging from 5 to 10 people. So in addition to the so-called skill strategy projects that I just mentioned, we also offer to countries technical assistance in specific topics. For example, I recently had the opportunity to work with Portugal, and I led this project, and the goal of which was to give guidance to strengthen quality assurance in adult education. Now, of course, quality in adult education is key for ensuring that training is of high quality and adults learn what they are supposed to learn, but also it is important to ensure that public funds and subsidies are used efficiently. So in Portugal, adult learning has grown very quickly over the past years, which is good because more people are participating in training and learning activities. However, the system is highly complex, has more than 3,000 providers. There are several ministries involved, and over the past years, some quality issues have surfaced. So one of the main issues is that, for example, quality is very difficult to assess and to monitor. For example, there are no common quality standards. Also, sometimes adult education providers are required to be certified by multiple agencies, and therefore the system is very cumbersome, and the efficiency, of course, can be improved. So in this project, we developed recommendations to improve the certification and monitoring of adult learning providers, but also recommendations to develop a system to monitor adult learning outcomes. For example, labor market outcomes or learning outcomes. We recommended to develop common quality standards and a quality label so that quality can be comparable across the system, and also to develop a system to monitor the quality of providers over time.
이수영 교수님 유튜브 채널에 오신 여러분을 환영합니다. 구독, 좋아요,
알림 설정까지